podcast. I'm joined by that creature in a filthy robe from Heaven Sent. How are you, filthy creature in a robe? Excellent. So, this is part 2 of the...
Wait! It's not a creature! It's me! Had
You
you
did.
fooled there, didn't I? You thought I was a mysterious creature in some big castle, like hunting you down because you don't tell the truth or anything
I thought
like that.
perhaps I had 82
You're a liar.
minutes
That's
to
right, because you're a liar.
get myself sorted.
Aye.
So, this is part 2 of the Death of Clara mini-series,
Yes.
in which we are looking back at, reviewing and discussing the final 3 episodes of Series 9 of Doctor Who, in which Clara is tragically somewhat taken from us.
She's deceased. She's defunct.
Yes.
She is no more. She's brown bread. She's toast. She's 6 feet under. She's worm food. You don't know what to say.
No, she's dead.
Got you there, haven't I? Got you. Yeah.
So this week we're talking about Heaven Sent, which was recently, as you may know, voted the number 1 Doctor Who story of all time in the DWM poll, garnering 35.1% of the votes. There you go. Magnificent Heaven. It's a pun on Magnificent 7.
We looked it up this time.
I'm just going to... Hang on, let me just have a look. So the top 10 was Heaven Sent, World Enough in Time / Doctor Falls, Genesis of the Daleks, Caves of Androzani, Day of the Doctor, Blink, Human Nature / Family Blood, City of Death, Remembrance of the Daleks, Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead. You'd be forgiven for thinking that only Stephen Moffat writes Doctor Who, looking at that.
You would, wouldn't you? Look at that. Yeah. I mean, he does write some very good episodes.
Very good episodes.
I'll give you that.
So Heaven Sent is almost a one-hander in that it only stars Peter Capaldi as the Doctor and Filthy Creature in a robe that does have a name. I can't remember what it's called. Is it like...
It's the Veil.
That's it, yeah.
The Veil. And it's got buzzy flies around it.
Yes, lots of flies symbolise
buzz
death
and announce its
Yes,
presence.
that's right.
Yeah. Decay and putrefaction and stuff.
It has a small cameo by Clara, so that elevates it to worth watching. So
I see where this is going to go.
I think... So basically the plot for this one is after Clara was killed by the Raven, it turned out to be a Time Lord's trap, and the Doctor is sort of somehow put into his confession dial, which turns out to be a rotating castle in a lake.
I think you need to reverse that, my friend.
Right.
The Doctor is teleported at the end of Face the Raven because he's got the bracelet on.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
He puts
he
his key in
does,
the lock and it traps him. It got hold of him like that. Get off me! And then he kind of is jumps out of a teleportation chamber thing, all confused, doesn't know what it is, but filled with anger because the last thing he remembers is that Clara was killed by the people who instigate the trap, and he knows who they are. And then the castle in which he finds himself turns out to be his confession.
Yes, you're right. That's right. We don't find out till the end, do we?
We don't know this until the very last moment, or at least we may suspect it, but we don't know for sure until we go right to the end of the program, and then we know. We find out. It's in the sand. It drops down like that. Pop! It just drops down. He picks it up, and there's a little castle, tiny little castle, and he was inside that. It was bigger on the inside.
Thanks, Korg.
Or smaller on the outside, whichever way you want to look at it. But that's what it is. It's the truth.
Piss off, Ghost.
That's not nice, is it? See the way I get treated?
You sound like Korg. Piss off, Ghost.
Oh, no. He over there, he's just a rock. I can't do when you say that. I try to do Korg, and then it just
you try and think about it.
Doesn't happen.
So this episode involves... to be honest, we probably don't need to really explain it. I'm sure anyone listening knows.
Say this every
involves
time.
the Doctor in a sort of puzzle box...
I like
twisting,
that idea.
turning. I don't dislike it. And as the story progresses, we discover more about the entrapment in there and how the Doctor is having to kill himself each time to get rebooted via the hard drive recording of himself, and presumably each time he doesn't remember what's happened after his arrival in the transmat cubicle.
He has to learn it
He's got to learn it
each
new. So
time.
he's leaving himself notes like a bird in the sand, and he spends a couple of billion years there slapping around a diamantium wall or something.
What a way to spend eternity, eh?
But he does
just
it.
knocking around some old castle or something, tries to hunt you down.
He does it because he loves Clara, and the whole time he's talking about Clara, like talking to her like she's there, and he's doing it because he wants to impress her rotten corpse and exact revenge on those people who.
He has a painting.
He does have a painting, and the fact that it's all dry and flaky indicates how long he's been
old.
there, although he doesn't remember that at the time. And he wants to go and get revenge, basically, although he remembers that Clara told him not to, and
don't do it.
Doesn't.
Don't do the
he
revenge.
Doesn't listen.
That's what she said.
And so in this episode, you
try and make it sound a little bit more lively, mate.
Well,
and in this episode,
no, I was just thinking what to say next, but it is quite a downbeat episode. And rewatching it again, I am both amazed at it as a piece of writing by the performance of Capaldi. He really goes through a huge amount in this, and the fact that he largely single-handedly carries the episode just shows how good an actor he is, and I would say that any of the Doctor actors could do a one-hander.
I agree. I think any one of them would love the opportunity to have a Heaven Sent type episode. I mean, Tom Baker kind of wanted it, didn't he? And he got the Deadly Assassin written for him as a kind of a joke, but actually in the Deadly Assassin he wasn't on his own at all, because he did end up with some temporary companions in the form of the Castellan and the Coordinator. They were sort of his stand-ins for that story. So he didn't quite get to do the one-hander, but I reckon all of them would love the kill for the chance and would absolutely excel.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's quite, it's a confident move to have done this episode. Whenever a show kind of breaks from its usual format, I think you're showing a kind of confidence in abilities as a writer within the structure of the show format, the cast. And funny enough, I was thinking the other day about there were some comments from Denis Villeneuve, or however you pronounce his name,
Denis Villeneuve
about Dune 2 and how he felt that cinema should be a visual-only medium and not have any dialogue. And I thought about the Buffy episode, Hush, where they all lose their voices, and it was written because everyone used to say, that Whedon did such great dialogue and stuff like that. So he thought, okay, well, I'll do one without dialogue. And then it ends with Buffy and her boyfriend Riley sitting together, and they say, I think we need to talk. And it ends in them in silence, which, having just lost their voices in the episode is quite amusing.
That one. It rings a bell. I might see it.
And I think, doing something like that and like doing a musical example, as well is quite, it's quite a good challenge. It's quite brave. I don't really agree with Villeneuve, but, I think it's...
But you see what he means, though. Cinema is a visual medium, so use the visual aspect to its fullest, and that's what Dune absolutely does. That's what all his films do. He's brilliant at that, along with Cameron, of course. Does the same sort of thing, and a whole bunch of others. He
was saying you don't need dialogue. I don't agree with that, but I think make use of that.
It's an interesting. It's an interesting point, though, because if the visuals can tell the story alone, then it can do a lot of the heavy lifting. I think that's what he means. To squeeze. I mean, Dune annoys me at the moment because it's two parts of a film. And I really, really dislike Angry Customer from Bath right now. I do dislike chopping a film in half. Just give me the full 4.5 hours or 5 hours. I don't care. None of this namby-pamby waiting for 2 years in between one half of a film and the second half of a bloody
2
film.
years?
Just give me the whole bloody
2
thing.
years? Try
Near enough
13.
2 years.
Then come back to me and complain.
That's a sequel. Avatar 2
it's
is
the
a
same.
different film.
It's the second part of the story. Yes.
Is it not a sequel, though?
No. Well, it is, but it's
part 2 of Avatar.
So,
but Avatar, the original, was complete. It had a complete structure.
Yes.
You could go through life right, not seeing any more
Yeah.
Avatar and be happy or content
Which
that
would
that was
be
enough.
a life wasted.
Whereas Dune is literally half the book. It's, you know, there's a complete story in the whole book, and part 1 is literally just half of the book.
Yes.
So 2 is the rest of the story. It's one story across 2 films. Yeah, there's that as well. Yeah. For people listening on audio only, Jeff's insinuating there is a nasty, dirty commercial hunger for this kind of thing. Mission Impossible as well, the latest one. You know?
Well,
Which I
yeah,
still haven't
technically,
seen.
because
I'm waiting until part 2 of that is out,
it's-
so I can actually watch it as one complete
why would
film.
you wait like that? It's going to be renamed. It won't be
Because I can live.
Dead Reckoning Part 1 or Part 2. It's
Mm.
just Dead Reckoning, and then 8 will have its own title after that. So
Thanks for that.
I'm waiting for Tom to come round my house and exchange my Steelbook to one that doesn't have Part 1 on it.
They were filming up here, you know, for one of the Dead Reckonings. They were literally on the
train
hill
bit,
just
wasn't it?
outside my
Yeah.
house.
Was
Eh?
it for the train?
I don't know what it was. I don't know, because I haven't seen the film yet. I don't know what bit. And I didn't go out because I remember texting you. I'm like, because I read it in the paper and it was on Facebook and everywhere and everyone's buzzing about it. And I remember texting you saying, Tom Cruise is up the road filming. And you're like, go up there, go up there, go up there. And I'm like,
Idiot.
just to wind you up.
So, keeping this back on topic.
Sorry, go on. Yes, Doctor
So,
Who.
yeah, I think Heaven Sent is it's a great episode. It is
Brave,
really, in some ways. But watching it again, it sort of struck me that...
were you bored?
No, not bored. I think that I'm drawn in by, you know, the whole thing and by Peter and everything, but I was watching it and a couple of thoughts really. Kids are going to be like, what the hell is this? They're going to be bored. They're not interested. It's too slow. It's too long. It's too moody. Too complicated. But whilst I do think the show, has to appeal to a wide audience,
Yes,
of kids and adults and stuff as well. I think at this point in the show's life, what was it been? 10 years, but by that point that it had been back.
Yeah, near enough. Yeah, I think it was 2013,
something
2014.
like that. Well, Series 9, so it was about
Series
10
9,
years, wasn't it?
Which has on the back of it 2015, so it would have been 2014. Yeah.
So, people watching it when they were in 2005, would be 10 years older. So you can kind of take an assumption that your audience would grow up with you. So, but I did think that.
But what about a new
Well, that's
audience?
the thing. So
is this where you're going?
Yeah, for a new audience, if you happen to,
if this is the first time they switched on Doctor Who, and I thought, what's this all about?
And then
now?
the other thing is,
I
if you
don't
watched
understand
it and you were like, "Oh, this is really good. Let's check out more Doctor Who." What the hell? It's nothing like it.
You're never going to get
And it's
that
like
again.
when people will say, "What would be the episode that you'd show to people to get them into Doctor Who?" And they say,
Not that one.
Blink. And I
Yeah, not that one either.
Blink is great. It possibly
The Doctor's hardly in it.
overdone a bit, in terms of its hype and all of that. But yeah, the Doctor's not in it. It's like saying,
He's in a DVD format.
he's just sort of glorified cameo in it, and it's a very clever episode and its structure and all of that. And it's
clever.
a great intro for Weeping Angels and stuff. But yeah, the Doctor's not in it, and it's not Doctor Who. In the classic,
Well, it's not typical Doctor Who.
Yeah, that's what I say. It's not in the
it's
classic and usual sense.
It's a unique
of it,
kind of episode.
So yeah, I think Heaven Sent is a really fantastic, powerful episode. But it's so weird. It's such a sort of odd anomaly in a way, and
yet it's number one
Yeah.
in the reader poll. The DWM readers have
and
spoken.
in some ways I agree with that because it's excellent across the board. But in other ways I disagree because I don't think it's what a classic Doctor Who episode. And I think if you're going to vote for the best Doctor Who episode of all time,
You'd vote Caves of Androzani, wouldn't you? I mean, it's
something that kind of
given.
adheres to the normal, is a normal sort of
Or
typical
typical.
type of Doctor Who, But I thought that it deals with the way, the Doctor was clearly, Clara meant a huge amount to him, and I think he was probably in love with her to his own funny way, and he's motivated by her, throughout the whole thing to get revenge and to carry on and to
Is he motivated by revenge in this story?
Well,
is it revenge that gets
I
him
think
through?
it is maybe at the beginning because he says, the doctor is in, and he, I'm coming.
Sort of gets him out the teleporter.
Yeah, but towards the end, I think it's probably more a desperation to get out and see what's going on. But what I say, is it about revenge? But then when he gets to Gallifrey, he says to the random kid, "Tell him I'm coming for them."
Yeah, then it's back. He's back on quest, then, isn't it? I think initially it's anger that gets him through. The anger that there was nothing he could do to stop Clara's death at that point. And in this way, I think it's sort of, when you look at the Doctor's journey through this, I think it becomes a kind of a metaphor for how we all sort of deal with grief. Somebody close to us passes away. There's nothing we could have done. In most cases, there's absolutely nothing. All you can do is stand by and watch or whatever. And that gives you a real sense of helplessness, and you want to do something, but what can you do? So, you feel angry, it generates a kind of anger and frustration and everything else. And I think initially the Doctor's angry that he's here. And, so not only can he not do anything, he's in this messed up, weird place, so he's taken away. So he can't even get close. He can't go back. He can't even revisit the place where she died and find out what to do next.
He's imprisoned in his own feelings.
But then it's a kind of exactly that, which is, I'll come back to that if you give me a chance, right? So, so after that, so after the kind of anger's gone, it's about survival, because he doesn't even have to have time here to really get to grips or to come to terms with his anger or even what's really happened, because the veil is chasing him relentlessly. It just keeps on moving towards him, always through the shortest way possible. And then just when he thinks he's kind of outwitted it, of course, the environment changes, the surroundings sort of change, and I love that. And then it becomes about, if you look at him escaping the veil as trying to, surviving each encounter, almost again as like a metaphor for surviving grief. If the veil represents grief, he's constantly trying to run for it. It's only when he can face it, when he faces it and confesses what he's really feeling, that it stops hunting him. It literally freezes. So I love that as a kind of, slightly deeper metaphor for that very human journey. But of course, again, towards the end, then it becomes about getting out, which again, we all have to do. We all have to punch through that diamond wall. The hardest thing to move on with your life, to live with the loss that you've just experienced, to have another day without that person. It's the toughest thing. I think that, visually, I think it's dumb, punching through a diamond wall, but in an allegorical sense, it absolutely works. If you look at this story as a grief for surviving through as a metaphor for surviving through grief. There you go. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Does that work?
Yeah.
Do you get me?
I get you. Yes, cool. it does, work like that. And I think it is a very, as is standard of the Moff, it's a very clever script, and
really script.
Your description of it there, I think, is accurate.
I've got more.
You are sure you have. You go through stages of grief, don't you? And this kind of represents that quite well. And I think looking at it visually and from a sort of directorial point of view, I think
put your director's hat on.
It's really nice shot.
Director.
There's some beautiful bits of lighting in it, and
it's gorgeous. It's lovely.
The challenge of showing something with all the repetition and visually is quite well stood up to. That challenge is met and it's delivered. You're not. You do get shots repeated, but then they change them, and there's a really brilliantly edited bit later on where it's just going over the same thing and stuff, and he's jumping out the window and whatnot.
But they kind of mix it up.
They
quite
do,
nicely,
and it starts
to... they do repeat the sequences, but sometimes from different angles, and then they repeat different sequences as well. So you never get the whole thing of just having to go through the whole thing again and again for 4 billion years or whatever it is.
And it's
2 billion years.
I can't remember. It keeps on kind of.
The sort doesn't matter. It's in the billions.
Yeah,
so
it's a long time.
So it increases the age of the Doctor quite a lot.
Does it?
Yeah,
or does it? Yeah. Yeah.
Is this now the Doctor? Did the Doctor not die in a teleport then, or at the end, before he teleported himself? Is this really the Doctor?
Yeah.
But then, if that's the case, then because if the teleporter reassembles somebody from a pattern, so it's a copy of them, does that mean the Doctor is? was a copy ages ago. The first time they ever stepped through a teleporter transmat thing.
Well, yes, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I sort of
because it's one thing that's always bugged me about this story is the fact that the Doctor dies. You know, we see the Doctor
Yeah.
die. He can't regenerate. His cells degrading too quickly, or whatever it is, and he puts electrodes on his skull, doesn't he?
which he later
and then
picks up.
literally throws a switch, uses the energy from himself burning to power the teleport to reproduce himself afresh, so to speak. So, but at that point, he actually dies, and I think that's the difference. We haven't seen the Doctor die, and of course, all those skulls in the water, they're all the Doctor.
Yeah,
they're all the dead Doctors. So it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I think so. Anyway, you know, it keeps me awake at night every time I watch this episode. Did the Doctor actually die?
Well,
and if so, does that mean that we're seeing the Doctor or a copy of the Doctor? But if it is a copy of the Doctor, then was it even a copy of the Doctor at the first time? Anyway,
Well, I think so,
because the Doctor's been in many transfer things.
I think this one probably.
Or should I just go?
No, it's not the transmat because he said there's a hard drive or something, isn't he?
Yeah. But it's so there's a Star Trek Next Generation episode, right, where Scotty from the old series returned through a transmat, and you know the transport beam that they use in Star Trek, same kind of thing, right? So the idea is that it disassembles you, right, all your matter, all your atoms, everything, stores it in Star Trek in a pattern buffer, right, aka a hard drive, and then when you're needed at the other side, it basically takes that information and then pops you out, reassembling all your atoms and everything else from that pattern buffer / hard drive. So Scotty in Star Trek had stored himself in this pattern buffer to kind of escape something, and then he's recreated Pop, like, you know, when they find him in the transport thing. So is that like the Doctor? So there's a copy of Doctor in the pattern buffer here, right? So it's constantly reproduced from that.
I suppose if that is what's happening and he's being reproduced like that, you could say it's life, Jim, but not as we know it.
He kind of says it's like and it's a really nice line actually. He kind of puts it in the mind of those of us who are less technically minded. It's like it's like a 3D printer. You know, you've got everything stored on that on your hard drive, and you just press print, and away you go. It's an exact copy of the same thing.
Yeah.
But then, you know, it's the thing is about all the memories and stuff like that, which is a whole other story. So best not to get into that. I guess.
Also,
to say it's complicated science.
When we join him when he first appears there, and then he later finds his jacket and everything, he's already you know, this is, you know, version whatever going through it, you know, and he's already done it. So there's quite a lot of layers to it, I think, really. And
but where did so this is a nice moment, isn't it? Because he jumps in the water, finds all the skulls, climbs back out, he's all dripping wet, finds a nice room with a fire and the same clothes hanging up to dry, and they're nice and dry. So he changes them, and then the wet clothes are there left to dry for the next person who does.
Well, then obviously he'd have to have
left
them.
What about Doctor Number One in there, right? Because the first time he was there, he wouldn't have had any clothes, right, on which to replace his wet clothes.
By thinking that way.
So did he do the rest of that episode in the buff?
Thinking that way.
The very first time he appeared in it?
Dismantle the whole thing. So don't do it. But
saying that,
you are right.
I think I read I think I did read a Stephen Moffat interview somewhere where he said there was already clothes there for the Doctor. So he kind of Stephen Moffat just says, it's obvious, you know, there's already some clothes there.
I can live with it because, you know, it's obviously in a sort of.
It's not the end of the world, is it?
It's kind of a loop thing going on, and you know, Doctor One would have had to have left his stuff there. And is it everything? Was it just a jacket and boots? I can't remember.
No, it's everything. It's the shirt, the boots, the trousers.
So maybe he threw himself in the fire with grief or something. I don't know. And left his stuff there.
Well, maybe the first time it didn't. Whatever happened afterwards didn't actually happen because presumably it's a long time to have left all those clues. You know, because you would start with clue 1. And then the next round would be understanding clue 1 and everything else, and then maybe leaving a second clue a few generations on, and so on. So those clues are built up over time, haven't they?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would think that. He ended up going off in the nuddy afterwards. I reckon that's what he did.
I think he did the whole thing in the nud, which is, you know, it's a good job that he's the only person in that story.
You know, you can't prove that the veil can see anything. So
Well, you say that, but is the images that are on the TV screens that the Doctor sees, are they from the veil? Are they the veil's point of view? Because he can always see it coming. Every time he looks at a TV screen, he knows that the veil is looking at him from whatever perspective that TV picture shows him.
Yes, you're right.
But it's never explicitly stated. It's just kind of there. I think we kind of gather it from the visual clues, visual storytelling. Again, you see, it's a really visual episode. I mean, I'll tell you what, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Because the visuals in this do carry a lot of the heavy lifting. They have to. You know, the Doctor's explaining stuff, but it could be a whole 50 minutes of, mansplaining, pretty much, if they're not careful. There are moments of that, I think. Is there a look to camera as well?
Yeah, there is one, I think, at some point. Yeah.
So we're the audience that is, I'll try and find another word for mansplaining, but it keeps popping into my head and swamping every other word. Exposition, right? That's probably worse, actually. Because I don't know. This for me is a really tricky episode, right? Because so the first time I watched this back in the day, I loved it. I thought it was great. And I thought it was probably the best one of the season because I was carried away, like you said, by the whole bravery of it, and the sort of deeper layers and all the symbolism and the metaphors and the allegories and all that sort of stuff. And but I think each successive time I've watched it, I've possibly enjoyed it less, and I haven't watched it that many times compared to a lot of other stories because I don't want to enjoy it less. I just want to keep it in my mind as being this really great thing. But I think the thing is, each time I look at it, because a lot of it, so much of it depends on the kind of twists that are revealed throughout, right? Because I think the first time I watched it, I kept wondering if Clara was actually going to show up, or at least if somebody else was going to show up. And of course, they don't. So once you know that affects how you view it the second time round, and so on. And then next time I started wondering about things like the clothes and stuff like that. And then I started wondering about, well, because the bit when he looks at the stars, he's on top of the tower. And he's done his Hamlet piece to one of his predecessors' skulls, sits it on there, and he keeps looking up. And the first time actually, it's like the stars aren't right. He's time traveling.
Yes.
And then that becomes like a clock. So the next time the stars have moved, and obviously over billions of years, they're in a completely different place. But surely the Doctor could be looking up at any part of the universe from any direction. So if the Doctor recognizes where those stars are, right, then he must think he's in a specific place, or he must be in a specific place. But he doesn't, right? Because he doesn't know where he is.
No.
Right? And actually, if he's in the confession dial anyway, how's it he can kind of see the stars? Okay, magic signs, whatever, right? But the biggest thing is how does he recognize that group, that particular patch of sky that he's looking at as belonging to a certain point of view at a certain point in time? Or does he just recognize the whole look of the universe just instantly, just like that? Because if you know what I mean, right? If you travel to Alpha Centauri, right, our nearest star, and you look, but you'll still see the same constellations pretty much that we see from here, but they won't look like the same constellations because everything's kind of moved around. Yeah. So from your perspective, all the stars are in a different place. Doesn't necessarily mean you've time traveled. It just means you're in a different place in the universe.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as well, you've got the whole kind of, the whole light speed thing, right? Forget about relativity and stuff like that. But, light will travel at a different period. The time it takes for the light from a specific star to reach Earth is going to be different to the length of time it takes for that light to reach Alpha Centauri, because it may be further away or it may be closer, right? So it may be that some of those stars that we see, you can't see from Alpha Centauri because they don't exist yet or they're dead. So again, all this sort of stuff, right? How does the Doctor know that the universe, that he's moved 7,000 years initially, right, just by looking at a bit of sky? I don't get it. It don't work. So things like that start keeping me awake at night. And, him running around in a buff on his first iteration. And, the whole thing being a kind of metaphor for his kind of bad dreams as well. Why are you suffering?
Oh, you make my head hurt with
head
this.
In his hands. Welcome to my world. This is me. This is my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
That freaks me out every time with the stars. I get it. You need something to kind of just act like that clock. But the implication that the Doctor could just look at any point in the sky, know exactly
He's very clever.
how many years
He's very clever.
happened.
But remember, he feels all the time.
Well, indeed.
There you go.
There you go. There's the answer. And he doesn't have a Sonic to wave around. That's one good thing about the story. There's no Sonic effing screwdriver in the whole thing. So thank you, Stephen, for giving us a story that does not contain that magic get out one. Thank you.
So do we have...
But we do have a blackboard and a ghost.
Oh, a mannequin of Clara, and then till she comes up and tells him to get off his arse and... keep fighting. I
quite like that bit, actually.
Yeah, I mean...
I mean, this whole thing is basically the Doctor's subconscious, isn't it? He's kind of working his way through.
Yeah.
He doesn't have an audience until he looks at us at the camera. So he imagines himself back in the TARDIS, kind of working through, explaining to somebody, right, to how clever he is and how he's going to get out of this. Now, I do like that, and that idea of him kind of falling and then working out how he's going to get out of it on the way down. Literally within the seconds going through his head, and he kind of slows time down, so he's got the relative time to kind of have that inner conversation.
And you see similar,
and of course, again,
I remember, you see similar to that with 13 in Once Upon a Time, when it's all played in slow-mo.
It's the whole episode is pretty much that, and also previous to this in Matt Smith's first story, isn't it? When he's on the green in the village, he's like, putting it all together. So I do like that. I think that's quite a nice thing, and I do like the whole sort of kind of, because it is a sort of wandering through the Doctor's subconscious. I love the idea that this is his confession dial, and I like the fact it's not kind of revealed to the end. You sort of suspect it because some of the mechanisms, if you remember, the confession dial, sort of look the same. We never really had a very close look at it, just fleeting, wasn't it? In The Magician's Apprentice, and then a couple of other times, a bit in Face the Raven, and there it is. But it's always been there throughout the whole thing. So you sort of suspect it, but then it's not until the very end when we see, it's brilliant. He's trapped in his confession dial, and there's a really nice kind of loop how it works. The fact that the very environment and the fear, the terror that he's kind of brought with him from his own subconscious is the thing that he has to face up to. He has to confess the truth of X, Y, Z, what he did and why he's done it and that sort of stuff. So that's all really nice. And, from a visual perspective, the idea of being in a castle, which is completely bizarre in one respect, right? Because it's not very sci-fi. It's more Gormenghast, it's more fantasy than sci-fi, but, it's got sort of cogs and intricate ancient mechanisms and a teleporter and stuff. So it's a real hodgepodge. But of course, the castle in literature, like the raven is a symbol of death. The castle is usually a kind of a sort of metaphor for your inner self, for your subconscious. For all the dark terrors that have haunted you since you were born that you didn't even know about. Perhaps they're all there in the castle. There's Franz Kafka's novel, The Castle. Explores that very idea. It doesn't. With young Kay sort of coming up against an impenetrable bureaucracy, and in trying to get to the heart of the castle and get through that bureaucracy, he has to kind of face his inner demons as well. And that's exactly what we've got going on here. The Doctor is locked in a castle, a kind of sort of expansion of his head with something that terrified him as a child, whether it was a real thing or whether it was something that you make up as a child, whether it was even the thing in Listen that lifts out of the bed, because it could be, if that thing lifted up and had the bedclothes all around it, then there you go, that's maybe what it is. But it doesn't matter, some terror that has always lurked in his subconscious.
The fear is face to face with it, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. Where are you going? Am I boring you? I haven't started yet.
It's too hot in here.
Oh, you're getting too hot. Turn that fire down.
So, hold on, where did I put it? So, I was going to read a few thoughts from people on this episode, and also had some more about Clara from last week to.
We're back on Clara. No, she's not even in this episode. She's not even in this story.
I could save them for next time. So Max Blake said, I feel like this episode is a masterclass for all people involved, which I agree with. Stephen Matthewman, who I believe is a relatively new follower, he says, Face the Raven is just heartbreaking and Hell Bent is simply brilliant. But you didn't tell us what you thought of Heaven Sent. I'm gonna guess you
well
meant
done.
that.
Did you not read these before you read them out?
And then someone has written, for a smart guy, they are quite dumb. So
Who, the Doctor?
Well, possibly, yeah. So did we have a couple of voice notes to play about this
We
episode?
do, yes. Let's hear rather from Heather Crossley. She sent us something from she sent us something for Face the Raven, didn't she? So she's also sent us something for Heaven Sent. So here is Heather. Let's listen to what she says. Hold on. You might have to edit that.
Worked.
I needed to press the button. Let's listen.
Heaven Sent. So I would say aye, definitely. Favourite episode.
Oh.
I feel like you, the viewer, are kinda in the same place that the Doctor's in, because you have been gut punched 7 days ago. You were gut punched. And you're like, I'm grieving too. Do you know what I mean? I feel what you feel. And it's like kinda cathartic as well, because you're going through obviously what he's going through, and obviously he's in his torture chamber, and he's, do you know what I mean? Like he doesn't really know what's happening, and I feel like you don't really know what's happening either. And it's like, it's like everything's just pure weird, and you're like, what's going on? But at the same time, it's like at the end, you're like, oh, do you know what? We can do this. Like, we can get through this, and that's personally what I love about Doctor Who, because it's like very motivational, and it's like no matter how bad you're feeling or how bad something's happened like in your life, and no matter how bad that is, it's like always find that you can find the motivation in Doctor Who, and that's exactly what Heaven Sent is. It's like at the end, get up off your arse and win. It's like you can do it. You've got the tools. You can do this, and that is why I love Doctor Who.
Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? There you
I must say,
exactly
Heather,
that.
if you've managed to move on from Clara dying, then good for you. I have not
yet.
No, that's very interesting. I think I hadn't really kind of thought of it like that. That, you know, a week previous to this, you know, we lost Clara, or we thought we did, and we would have been, you know, as fans grieving, you know, for that loss and things, and then, you know, so we kind of follow, you know, along with the Doctor and his feelings in this, and it kind of represents, you know, us. Unless you're some people who were chuffed that she was gone. Someone did comment. I wonder if I can find it quickly. Yeah, here you go. Michael Moslin, Face the Raven was brilliant as we got rid of Clara. Hooray! Hellbent was rubbish as we got her back. Boo. And he said, Heaven Sent bored me to tears the only time I've watched it. So yeah, maybe some people would not be feeling the same way.
I think some people just,
you know, if they didn't like Clara and were pleased she was gone.
I think some people just want the adventures. Don't
yes,
they?
I can fully understand why.
You know, it's giving a whole bunch of Cybermen and Sea Devils.
And I do think a show should
a whole load of
do
nonsense,
different
lots
things.
of explosions.
But yeah, I get it. This is not, you know, the standard sort of thing. And I think also Heather's right there about, you know, Doctor Who being there and a kind of a source of comfort and inspiration. And, you know, I've said this before, was one of the things I liked about 13 was that it was very hopeful and optimistic, and sort of ended up, you know, being present in a very difficult time around the world, you know, with COVID and stuff, and kind of served as a sort of bit of beacon of hope there, you know. But the Doctor's always hopeful and positive, you know, largely anyway. And you know, I can see why, and I'm sure you and I do it, Paul, that, you know, you go back to comfort episodes because, you know, you want that joy and that, you know, that bit of happiness with them again, and the adventure.
It's mostly because I'm bored and can't be asked to watch anything else. I forgot,
because you've got a hard stone, isn't it? Yeah. So, did we have a voice note from our pal Joe?
We do indeed have one from Joe. I haven't listened to all of this.
Right.
I only listened to the start of this because I thought, no, let's leave the surprise. So I've got no idea what Joe's going to say.
Maybe
and I
remove
myself, distance myself from any responsibility for anything that he does say. Here goes.
Well, hello there. As I sit on Eastbourne Beach in the beautiful sunshine, I'm delighted to tell you people at Who Corner to Corner that Heaven Sent is the most boring episode of Doctor Who I think I've ever endured. Now, don't get me wrong. I think this is impeccably executed and probably very cleverly written. But I don't know, Doctor Who as an art house movie, a miserable, grief-stricken old man walking around in silence for almost an hour. What the hell are the kids supposed to make of this?
That's what
I
you said.
mean, what kid was truly gripped by this piece of television? Yes, this is Doctor Who for aged geeks, which a lot of the Stephen Moffat era is geared towards. But it forgets about the kids entirely. Yes, it's a very worthy piece of television. Yes, it's dealing with... Mind you, not that Clara's worth this episode. Anyway, she's so bloody boring. I can think of a million companions I would... I think this episode should be about more than Clara. No, it's really troubling. It's a troubling period of Doctor Who where the children are being forgotten about entirely, and we're catering just for a particular type of adult. It's a good piece of television. It's very dull, Doctor Who. Entirely. Yes, it's a very worthy piece of television. Yes, it's so bloody boring.
I just couldn't resist just replaying that little bit there. Brilliant. I had a feeling he was going to go that way, because I think he said in a lot of his tweets, and I'll post that, he's found it quite dull.
Yeah, I know Joe's not a big fan of Clara, but you know what? He's respectful about it, and he knows my feelings for her, and I respect it, and having civilized and humorous discussion about it like this is great, and yes, it does kind of line up with what I said. Thanks both, by the way, Heather and Joe, for sending voice notes in. If anyone else would like to do one, www.speakpipe.com/whoc2c. I agree with Joe that this
not for the kids, or forgotten about the kids.
And so you could have the kind of get out that, well, kids are 10 years older now when they started watching Doctor Who when it came back, so therefore they're a bit older and a bit more mature. That's true. But also, there's going to be, imagine if I'd sat down with Ethan and this was his first episode and he's 8, he wouldn't have got through 5 minutes of it,
No, if I'd have sat down with Freya and this had been her first episode, she wouldn't. She wouldn't be watching Doctor Who now. No. She wouldn't be excited for it. She just wouldn't engage with it at all. As I said before, her first Doctor Who was the pilot, series 10. So that was a perfect jumping on point, and she's been with it since. But she'd have come on earlier. Anywhere within the Capaldi years, I don't think. No. She told me,
and like I've said before,
hasn't engaged with any of these stories in the same way at all.
If in Death of Clara 1, I went through the list of series 8 and 9 episodes, and it's 90% banger, and which is ironic in some ways because it was so dark and more kind of grown up, particularly in series 9.
You say that, but I know you said this in the last podcast as well, didn't you? But I think it needs a bit more than just, to be called dark and to be called grown up, because I just think those things really are kind of they're sort of okay. Where I'm getting at is they're not really dark, and they're not really grown up. They're kind of like the Virgin New Adventures. When the Virgin New Adventures were out in the 90s, they were written, to be darker and more grown up than the actual series was. And in doing so, kind of left a lot of the good stuff that identified as Doctor Who way behind. It's almost like, we're so concerned about this that it's, they sort of almost lost track of why everybody liked Doctor Who, all the good stuff. And I think that's in some ways maybe not quite as an extreme, but I think we're treading dangerously on that within these, within series 8 and 9. It's not necessarily darker and it's not necessarily grown up. It's almost like it's somebody's idea of what darker is, or somebody's idea of what grown up is. I don't, when I think of something dark and grown up, I don't really think Doctor Who ever really sort of does that, but except in a sort of almost adolescent kind of way. It talks about grief in some ways, right? But can only do it by, in metaphors or in very simplistic terms, because it is still always, aimed at a family audience. And I get where you and Joe are coming from with this, but I sort of disagree. I think what Stephen's trying to do is wrap up a relatively complex idea, which is really there for, as you said, the older fans who kind of have the emotional and intelligence capacity to kind of see all those things. But I think also he's trying to write it for the kids as well. So it is a very simplistic way of telling a complex story.
But I think if you're looking at Doctor Who for complex, deep stories that are metaphorically about politics,
that's what I mean.
Like
you won't find it
there, and
right?
anyone who's
so it's not. I think there are Buffy episodes that are darker than this. I think there are Buffy episodes that are more grown up than this.
So
because I think that series tackles those things from a humanistic. They're about people.
Yeah, it is about.
And whilst Doctor Who it still has at least one foot very firmly rooted in fantasy. So it can only really tell those stories, at least within this framework, from that perspective.
Yeah, no, you're right. And whilst I now feel a bit stupid for describing it as dark and grown up.
No, you're not. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump down your throat in that way.
It's an episode that's sort of torn in some ways between trying to, appeal to, adults more and tackle something quite heavy, but still trying to, make it work for the kids' audience. Which I don't think it does. It doesn't work for a kids' audience, and I'm not sure that.
I don't know. I suppose it depends on how old your kids are.
Yes, of course. I don't think a 5-year-old would get anything out of this.
No.
I don't think Doctor Who is a show for, like I just said, lots of really deep and heavy stuff about, life and blah blah blah. It touches on it.
It can reference it.
But it's not what it's about. And I think if you're looking at Doctor Who for it to be some sort of, political allegory or
well, it can do that. It can do that quite a lot.
But it's not the main thing.
It's exactly. It's always it's either on the surface, easy for everyone to understand, or it's just below the surface.
Yeah.
But still kind of visible. And this is why I know I keep going back to Russell T Davies, but Russell T Davies has a really good way of actually putting everything on the surface so that you immediately kind of understand it. I've said this before and it's true, but I think Stephen Moffat, he loves his layers. He likes to layer these things. And I think, I kind of get the impression that this could have been even, a much more complex story and a much more, impenetrable story than it turned out. And I think actually the fact that he's writing it for Doctor Who, for the Doctor Who audience, actually kind of restrains him in some way and makes the end result a lot better because it is easier to see those different things and it is easier to understand and in that way kind of relate to it. It is dark-ish, but again, you look at, in terms of its visuals very dark, and that's great. That's a lot of that is from Rachel Talalay latching on, isn't it? What she did Nightmare on Elm Street 4 or 5, one of the sequels, didn't she? But she knows fantasy and she knows horror and stuff like that. And I think the garden sequence was a lot to do with her, how it looks. I think originally it was supposed to be in like an atrium or something, and then she suggested, pulling all the mist and the trees and sort of building that scene the way that we eventually saw it. So I think and apparently as well, she kind of pre-visualized a lot. She drew a lot of these things out, went through the script, drew them so that she can understand what it was going to look like and how she was going to film it and where all that sort of stuff. So that was quite interesting. I do look at this as very much a collaboration. Stephen wrote the script. I understand. I'm not sure how true it is, but I understand it originally came from an idea he was thinking about pitching for Big Finish.
Oh, really?
Like way back. I think he had some idea of the Doctor being on their own, sort of trapped in a castle, being faced with fears that go back to the Doctor's childhood and stuff like that. And I think also when he eventually came to write this, I think they had to apply for almost like permission to not involve any other actors.
Really?
Because it's essentially you're taking somebody's job.
Yeah, I wondered how
just to
somebody Jenna not being in it
to make it a one-hander.
Yeah,
I think the guy who played the Vale was the guy who played Colony Sarth in A Magician's Apprentice and that. So but apart from them two, and as you said, the cameo from Clara, that's it, isn't it? But it is. I mean, it's great. I think that Doctor Who can do these stories even as just a one-off. The fact that Doctor Who can tell any kind of story really, and it does so. I think sometimes it could be in danger of losing the Doctor Who-ness of it and become something else, which is not Doctor Who. yeah, something else. Obviously,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
you know what I mean,
Yeah.
all right? So it's but I'm glad that it will. The one thing I do like about Peter Capaldi's stories is that they do really push the envelope of what you can do in a Doctor Who
Yeah.
story. I don't think they all really work, but you've got to give them kudos for trying, at the very least, trying to push it out, trying to just stretch the format and use Peter Capaldi as much as they do. Saying that, this thing starts with a bit of opening dialogue from him, doesn't it? Which by this point is not unusual, and I think actually it's a little bit dull for that, because it's like it's almost like when you look back at a lot of these stories, it's like, right, where can we give Peter a big speech?
Yeah.
Oh, let's give him one here and let's give him another one there, and then all you end up with is a series of stories which have monologues broken by the occasional bit of action. And that, I must admit, the first time this lot went out, I was finding it really boring. Really, I said before, I love Peter Capaldi and I love his Doctor and I love a lot of the stories, but I was getting really bored and depressed through a lot of these, thinking, please change what you're doing, because I don't know how much longer I can carry on watching this if it's going to be like this now. Yeah, seriously, I almost lost it with the Capaldi years. I really did. If it hadn't been for Series 10 coming back with Bill, I think I might have. Yeah, if Series 10 had been in the same vein as 8 and 9, then I'd have probably just not watched anymore.
I think you'd have come back to it with whatever had come
maybe,
after.
but it would have proper thrown me out.
Yeah,
because I was getting really, really bored and really pissed off with it all, and just.
I think if Series 10 had been like 9, I think that would have, put a lot of people off, and it would have probably hurt the show quite badly.
I mean, and if this is the sort of thing I have in my head, love the fact it's pushing the envelope, but at the same time, just please do something else now, because I've had enough. Anyways, yes. And boy, did they ever, coming back with a female Doctor and a completely different feel to the show.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And Series 10 as well is different, in many ways as well.
It is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I said, that's when Freya jumped on board. And
we should tackle one of that at some point.
Have we done a Series 10? Have we?
We've done a little bit in our Essential 12th Doctor.
We might have done. Yeah, we might have talked about World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls, didn't we?
Yeah.
Which I think is epic.
Yes, they are very good. Yeah. Right, I'm going to have to go, I'm afraid. But we will be back next week.
Oh, I've got to go as well, have I?
Well, you can carry on talking, but I've got to go and do something else.
Nobody deserves that.
But we'll be back next week with The Death of Clara Part 3, where we'll be tackling Hellbent. And I get to talk about Clara in the waitress outfit.
Oh, God, please help me. Somebody, please save me from this. It's been a lot of fun. I'm only joshing with you, Jeff. You have to get this out of your system. Like Heather said, there's a catharsis that needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if this helps you, let's do it.
I'm
might
there for you. Worse.
Pal. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Everyone.
Thank you for watching. Until next time. Ta-da for now.